Not long ago, I put out a video about privacy screens and how important they are as a privacy tool for your devices. And I mentioned how you can still get your fingerprint reader on the screen to work even with a privacy screen. Well, I got a lot of comments from people asking about whether fingerprint unlock is actually safe to use on their device. So I wanted to revisit this topic to explain how most fingerprint readers work and investigate whether you should use them. The answer is not going to be the same for everyone. I'll go through a bunch of different things to consider, including benefits and trade-offs of using biometrics, and also try to compare the security of fingerprint unlock versus a PIN or password. Note that how easy these things are to brute force is actually going to depend on the device that you have. Hopefully, once we've laid out a bunch of information, you'll be able to decide for yourself whether using the fingerprint reader to unlock your device is right for you. Let's start by understanding how most phones store and secure your biometric data when you use fingerprint unlock. When you set it up, the phone will take a series of scans of your fingerprint. Some devices use an optical scanner, which is basically a camera that lights up the screen to white and captures an image of your fingerprint. And other devices may use ultrasonic scanners, which create a 3D map of the fingerprint using ultrasonic sound waves. And these can work better with dirty or wet fingers. These prints are typically stored locally and not uploaded to the cloud. Apple uses something called the Secure Enclave, which encrypts the fingerprint data and stores it in an isolated part of the device, ensuring that it's not directly accessible by the operating system or any applications. Android uses a system called the Trusted Execution Environment, or TEE, which also works by turning fingerprints into encrypted data and then storing it in an isolated part of your phone. So fingerprint unlock is actually more private than many people realize, because your fingerprint isn't collected by Google and Apple like many people think, and instead is staying locally on your device. Both Google and Apple report that fingerprint data is never stored in servers or uploaded to the cloud, which also means that there's no repository there that could be breached. So should you use it? It really depends on your threat model, your tolerance for inconvenience, and your device itself. Consider this. Most people in today's hyper-connected world will unlock their phone about 100 times a day, or around every 10 minutes or so. In theory, you might love the idea of 100% protection for your phone, storing it inside a locked vault, surrounded by lasers, and requiring a 1,000-digit PIN to open it. If your device is highly targeted, you might be willing to deal with a lot of inconvenience to protect it. But if you have an average threat model, having to go through this every 10 minutes will probably make you scream. Many people will stop using privacy and security measures as soon as they become a burden. We want to find sustainable solutions for our lives that each of us are willing to do over and over each day. A fingerprint reader is one of the easiest ways to lock our devices. Almost 2% of people don't have any security on their device at all. Using fingerprint unlock really isn't going to add any additional burden. You just put your finger on the device and you're in. Note that fingerprint unlock can't be used alone. You'll need to add a PIN to the device too, but you'll only need to use the PIN after rebooting the device, and throughout the day, you'll just use fingerprint unlock. As well as convenience, another benefit of fingerprint unlock is that no one can shoulder surf you when you unlock your device and steal your PIN. In crowded places like bars, movies, or conferences, thieves will often watch people put their PINs into their devices and then later snatch the phone.
Johnson, seen here in red, would target people in and around bars to get their phones and their passcodes.
I'll just watch them put it in.
The thief can then drain your bank account or access other sensitive information on the device. This happens more frequently than you might think. A fingerprint unlock is a more private way to open your phone in public. There are other ways to mitigate this threat though, other than a fingerprint unlock. You can use a privacy screen to make it hard for anyone around you to see your screen. And if your phone allows it, you can also scramble the phone's PIN layout so that others can't guess the PIN from the general movements of your hand. Alternatively, some phones will allow you to use a password on your device instead, which can be helpful because the phone's keyboard layout will be harder to read than the PIN pad, which is usually much larger and fills the screen. One downside of using fingerprint unlock is that biometrics are forever. Your fingerprints are not revocable. When you forget your password, you can reset it, but you can't simply order a new set of fingerprints. So if you're ever required to provide fingerprints elsewhere and there's a data breach, attackers could use this information to get into your phone too. In 2015, for example, a US government hack saw 5.6 million fingerprints stolen from federal employees. And in 2019, the fingerprints of over 1 million people were discovered on a publicly accessible database. On top of that, biometric data is not as secret as we'd like to think. In 2014, there was a presentation at the annual Chaos Computer Club conference showing how the thumbprint of then German Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen was copied using nothing more than several close-range photos of her hands and commercially available software. Kraken put out a video in 2021 showing people just how easy it is to use such a photo to create a duplicate of someone's fingerprint and unlock their device. How good are fake manufactured fingerprints at opening devices? In 2020, Cisco reported an 80% success rate of using fake fingerprints to access devices where the sensors were bypassed at least once. Keep in mind, someone bypassing your fingerprint unlock would be a highly targeted attack to you specifically. It requires someone obtaining a clean copy of your prints, either from a photo or from something you've touched, duplicating the print, and then getting physical access to your device. So while fingerprints are not revocable, this kind of attack isn't in most people's threat model. So now let's try to compare the security of fingerprint unlock versus using a PIN or password. And a good place to start is to look at how easy it is to brute force each. This chart from Hive Systems suggests that someone could brute force a short PIN immediately using modern day cracking technology. But this may not be true for all devices. Some phones have brute forcing protections built into them. Pixel phones seem to have the best protections, using something called a Titan M2 chip that contains a Weaver token mechanism. And what these tools do is add a time delay to successive PIN attempts in order to prevent brute force attacks. After every wrong PIN attempt, an attacker has to wait longer and longer to try again. This means that if you have a Graphene OS device or an Android that uses Pixel hardware, a random 6-digit PIN is actually sufficient for protecting your device. Random is the key here. A user-chosen 6-digit PIN will be easier to crack. There was a study from many years ago that analysed all the PINs ever leaked in data breaches, which included millions of 4-digit passwords, and 18% used either 1234, 1111, or 0000. It turns out that it's much easier to guess user-chosen PINs because there are lots of similar patterns that are followed. As well as Pixel hardware, there are also other devices that also include safeguards against brute force attacks, such as modern iPhones and some Samsung devices. But the delay functionality found across most of these other devices is easier to bypass than the protections found on a Pixel phone. According to recent documents from the digital forensics company Cellebrite that extracts data from mobile devices for law enforcement and intelligence agencies, Pixel 6 and later, and the latest iPhones are the only devices where a random 6-digit PIN can't be brute forced in practice. For example, Samsung's brute force protections are apparently a lot weaker than modern Pixels and iPhones, and just recently, Cellebrite was able to crack a high-profile Samsung phone for the FBI in 40 minutes. 404 Media published these Cellebrite documents if you want to take a look and get an idea of how secure your device is. While these brute force attacks are going to require a certain skill level to pull off, which means they're likely to be more targeted attacks, this nevertheless means that to have robust security on most devices, you need a much longer PIN or password than many people realize. It's yet another reason to love Graphene OS phones, providing robust security with just a 6-digit PIN. So how does fingerprint unlock compare to PIN and password security? It can be somewhat difficult to judge and will again depend on your device and the operating system. One way to compare might be to look at how easy it is to guess a random short PIN versus the false positive rate for a fingerprint. It's not a perfect comparison, but it's a start. start. Let's start with a 4-digit PIN. There are 10,000 possible combinations that the digits 0 to 9 can be arranged in to form a 4-digit PIN code. There are 100,000 possible combinations for a 5-digit PIN. According to security and cryptography expert Brockwell, the false positive rate for fingerprints sits somewhere in the middle, at about 1 in 50,000. Wait, but aren't fingerprints supposed to be unique, and the chance of finding the same fingerprint is 1 in 64 billion? Well, it's not quite that simple. First, fingerprint readers have a lower image resolution than your actual fingerprints, and on top of that, phones use something called fuzzy matching and error tolerance. Basically, as Peters explains, no two fingerprint samples from the same person are identical, so when you scan your fingerprints, the phone stores a fuzzy match to accommodate these slight differences. Fuzzy matching does lead to errors, and one of these errors is known as the false acceptance rate, which measures how often an invalid user is given access to your device. You can dive specifically into the biometric requirements for Android and iOS, but apparently most biometric systems strive for an FAR of about 1 in 50,000. For example, Apple's Touch ID, which is widely considered to be the leading fingerprint implementation, claims a false match rate of 1 in 50,000, which means a 1 in 50,000 chance of an unauthorized user being mistakenly granted access by the biometric system. So Peters argues that the brute force risk of fingerprint unlock sits somewhere between a 4-digit PIN and a 5-digit PIN. But again, they're not quite comparable because brute forcing a fingerprint requires special tooling and a way to generate fingerprints that would be accepted by the sensor. But it's one helpful guideline that we found to at least give us a probabilistic idea of brute forcing risk, assuming that such tooling exists. Again, some devices are going to provide better protection for fingerprint unlock than others. On Graphene OS, you're allowed 5 fingerprint unlock attempts before you get locked out. Pixel with the stock Android OS will allow 20 attempts, after which time you're forced to enter a PIN, where you'll be further protected by the robust pixel time delay feature mentioned before. So putting the security of fingerprint unlock somewhere between that of a 4 and 5-digit PIN is a useful gauge, but if this system always reverts back to a PIN unlock, then ultimately the security of your device is really going to depend on how well your manufacturer handles brute force protection for that PIN. Another consideration is how robust your unlock method is against coercion. The most graphic form of coercion would be someone severing your finger to use it. Ew. Okay, this is a really extreme attack, but regardless, many phones do prevent against it. For example, Apple's Touch ID scanners use advanced capacitors that detect the natural electrical signals of your body, so a dead finger won't work. Phew. Another level of coercion is people forcibly making you unlock your phone while your finger is still attached. In theory, it's much easier to do this than force someone to take a code out of their head. But in practice, if someone's being threatened, most people are just as likely to tell the attacker their PIN to avoid getting hurt as they are to let the attacker use their fingerprint. But if you're in an extreme situation and keeping that PIN secret is of paramount importance, that will be a better security method for you than fingerprint unlock. A final form of coercion to consider is an international border crossing. To be honest, the legal landscape around this is super complicated and ever-changing, and also depends on where you're traveling. In the US, some courts see biometric unlock methods as being similar to physical evidence, like a DNA sample, and are more permissive of law enforcement forcing people to use their fingerprint to unlock their device. And some courts have treated PINs and passwords differently, typically considering them to be more like testimonial evidence, where they'd be protected under the Fifth Amendment. Based on this, you might consider powering off your devices when you travel, because this means that even if you have fingerprint unlock on the device, a PIN will be required when turning it back on. But it's super important to remember that these rulings are not uniform and the legalities around PIN coercion have not been settled. On top of that, Customs and Border Protection are often known for their aggressive enforcement of border policies that sometimes push legal boundaries. For example, just recently, a friend of mine was compelled to provide his PIN and passwords at the airport entering from Canada, and apparently was not even allowed to refuse and go back to Canada. The Institute for Justice made a great video about domestic travel recently, explaining what rights you have for your belongings in that situation. But even then, they advise that it's risky to ignore law enforcement and to be very careful how you respond in such situations. So, to summarize, what should you choose, PIN or fingerprint? Like we said at the start, there's no easy answer, and it depends on your device, your threat model, and your tolerance for inconvenience. But let's try to wrap it all up. Fingerprint is super convenient and way better than no unlocking mechanism. A fingerprint unlock might be more secure than a 4-digit PIN, but less secure than a 5-digit PIN, although this is a super rough tool for comparison, and pulling off a fingerprint attack is very different to pulling off a PIN brute forcing attack. If you have a newer Pixel device or the latest iPhone, a 6-digit PIN is going to be sufficient against brute forcing attempts. Fingerprint is safer against shoulder surfers. If you do go with the PIN, use a privacy screen to protect yourself, and if your device offers it, consider scrambling the PIN layout. Alternatively, a password is going to be harder for someone else to see you type in if they're shoulder surfing. If you're a candidate for a highly targeted attack where someone might go to the trouble of reproducing your fingerprints, you should probably go with a random and long PIN or password, or a 6-digit PIN if you're using a newer Pixel or the latest iPhone. Fingerprints are more like usernames than passwords. They're unique, static, and identifiable as belonging to you. But fingerprint security is very convenient, and for many people shouldn't be ruled out as an option. We are constantly unlocking our phones all through the day. So choose something that will be sustainable for you and is justified by your threat model. Otherwise, you might drive yourself insane. There is no perfect answer when it comes to phone security, so make a decision based on your unique context, and hopefully this information will be helpful in making that decision. If it was helpful, consider supporting our research. nbtv is a non-profit that creates free educational material to help shift the culture around privacy. Consider visiting nbtv.media/support to set up a monthly tax-deductible donation. And don't forget to check out our merch shop for cool t-shirts just like this one. Look at that cheeky eye. If you do like the t-shirts, let me know which ones are your favorite. That feedback's actually very helpful. Da -da 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 -da.